It is so good to see you this morning.
Great to see you too.
Thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Of course.
Could you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us who you are and the million things that you do?
Deano Moncrieffe. I am the co-founder of Hacha. We're in a beautiful site in Bermondsey.
We are.
And also the original site was in Dalston, opened May 1st, 2019. So we have two venues. I'm also the creator of a cocktail called Mirror Margarita, which is now a standalone brand and has been voted one of the best cocktails in the world.
Amazing. Congratulations on that.
You.
I see your lovely face on Saturday Kitchen with your Mirror Margarita sometimes.
Oh yes, yeah. Doing a little bit of TV stuff occasionally as well, so that's cool.
Yeah.
And also have a charitable organisation called Equal Measures.
We are here to talk about treat staff fairly, which is one of the key kind of pillars that we talk about a lot at Food Made Good. We believe that social sustainability often gets left out of conversations around sustainability.
Yeah.
And actually how we treat people, particularly in our industry, is a fundamental part of building a better hospitality into the future. So I'm really interested to hear, I know you do a lot of work in this space with Equal Measures, but also just as an owner, as somebody working in the industry, I'm really interested to hear what your view is of what it's currently like out there in bars and in hospitality.
I mean, I think so in general, it's a really tough time in hospitality. I think we can all be honest about that.
Yeah.
We notice that the average spend per head is down.
Okay.
In both of our venues. It's not particularly at weekends it's a little bit lower. Definitely we're missing out on the midweek crowd as well. And that has sort of impacts the way that obviously your staffing costs and your staffing levels, etc. So that does have a significant impact because you want to employ people full time, but there's a really difficult thing of that 3 to 4 days per week of working is a difficult one to actually find staff for.
Yeah.
It's either 2 days or 5 days, but not too many people want to work 3 days. But actually now it would be great if more people did want to work 3 days because that would help on the quiet days that we have when we can reduce our staffing costs. So there's those little challenges that you have to try and face.
Yeah.
Which again, I guess goes back to what you're saying about, treating staff fairly. I think it's really, we want to try and make sure that there's a really solid work-life balance. It often gets overlooked, but it's so important to make sure that you're able to enrich your team when they're not with you as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. And I think something that is on my mind constantly as somebody that's running teams, but also I can see that in the variety of businesses that we're talking to, where this kind of sense of what does purposeful work look like, and how do we help, especially young people coming into our industry or new people coming into hospitality. There's people that come into hospitality for all sorts of reasons, right? How do we help kind of build a better picture? A lot of talk about wanting a better hospitality than maybe they joined when people first started working in the industry. But no one is quite sure what that means, especially in these economic times that you're talking about, where you are juggling two things. Fundamentally, in order for you to treat your staff fairly and be a great employer, you also have to make the business work. Yeah. And so there's some real tension in how you do that.
Yeah, the issue is obviously trying to find the balance. I think that for us, it's really important. We know that everyone who works with us, the first thing that we say is, look, this is a culture we want to create.
Right.
Somewhere where you can progress, you feel safe, and that you feel like you have, you're part of a team, you're part of a community, you're part of our family. And so those are the key pillars for us, is making sure that people feel safe and feel included and know that they are respected and everyone is treated equally. That is pretty much the first thing that I say when I sit down and say, this is the environment you're coming into. Hopefully that's something that you'll find, a positive. And then everything else that we do is sort of formed from those pillars.
Yeah.
So whether that is like, one-to-one appraisals with myself, of like on a regular basis, sitting down and saying, what can we do for you?
Yeah.
How do we help you progress? If you don't want to progress, how can we still make sure that the time that you have with us is enriched?
Yeah.
So that, maybe you don't want to progress to become a head bartender and you're just happy doing your, part-time shifts. That's totally fine.
Right.
But I still want it to be enjoyable for you, and I still want you to take something away from your time with us that isn't just, the kind of, not robotic, but going through the motions of like
Right.
what you're doing, So I think that's a really important thing. And you build the connection with the individual to find what it is that you can help them with,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've pointed to some really key issues there. I think, first of all, you mentioned safety and like creating safe environments within hospitality. And then this kind of point about progression and how you engage with your teams. When thinking about hospitality as a whole, we know, right, that we are one of the most diverse workforces as a whole, and yet there are real barriers to progression, particularly for marginalized people working in hospitality settings. What do you think those sort of barriers are that are limiting progression across our industry?
I think the key barriers, I mean, I faced this in the past, is if you are from if you feel marginalized in any way.
Yeah.
I had it as a person of color, where I knew that I was not going to progress as quickly as my co-workers, which became really frustrating. And you're obviously seeing people progress in different environments and different working environments, a lot faster than you as an individual. And you think, well, I actually have the same. In fact, wait a minute, I'm really overqualified here to still be in this position, but I'm noticing that people are getting ahead. A lot of it is down to, I think just a real understanding of how important diversity is within the workforce and the benefits that can have for you, for your business.
Yes.
It's huge, right? The more the more diverse your workforce, it is, it's statistically proven that it is a lot, it increases profitability, increases like a feeling of well-being within the workplace as well. So these are things that I think are really important. The barriers that exist are probably from people who are not investing enough time to understand what it feels like to be from a marginalized, from a marginalized group, or a feeling marginalized,
or a global majority group.
Yeah.
The return on that investment is actually really, really strong for your business. It's building a better business fundamentally. How do you guys approach that in conversations, particularly through the work that Equal Measures is doing?
Well, I think if you look at most businesses will have a HR function, and the role of the HR is essentially to make sure that safeguarding and legally requirements are actually ticked off.
Right.
However, what doesn't happen, what's shoehorned in, is a little bit of the DEI policy.
Right.
But it's not, because it's not a legal requirement. It often is, how much do we want to take from this? How much do we want to how much time do we have to give to this? So I feel like the big issue is, because policies on inclusivity are not a legal requirement for hospitality, it gets overlooked.
Right.
Because there isn't, obviously, time, the HR department might think, well, we don't have time to actually do that.
Right.
And actually, it's not as important as making sure that this person, the grievance from this person is dealt with, or whatever legal requirements we have to make sure, are right for the business are looked at first. So I do understand that. But unless it is actually placed as important as that, it will become an issue. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, as an employer, if you have an option of having a policy in place, you have to make sure that you are committed to doing that.
Yeah.
But if you are committed to doing it, the returns will come, because you'll see the positivity, you'll see a better workplace, you'll see an increase in your sales. And I think it's really important for us. London is a huge, fantastic city, and it is so diverse. And I think within hospitality, it's so important that guests see people that reflect this wonderful, probably best city in the world. Right?
Let's be honest, best city in the world. Yeah.
But it needs to reflect that. The places that you go into, I often say that, sometimes you go into a venue, restaurant or a bar. If I don't see a person of color anywhere, I notice it. Right? I kind of think, okay, well, particularly depending on the areas. Is it in Soho? Is it in central London? Is it, in the outer areas? And it's not just person of color. It could, but that's what I automatically notice and resonates with me.
You start to realize like they're missing out on some talent here because the city around them looks different from the environment inside.
And I think that speaks a lot about the space as well. Like, are you an inclusive employer? We can see that obviously you're not from just going in there and everyone looking exactly the same. And it could be the same whoever it's like. I really like to, and this is pure coincidence, I think my management team that I've had in place, we've got an operations manager, general manager, head chefs, all female, and all from a variety. So we've got South America, we have Mexico, we have Australia. It's just like, just from everywhere. And our workforce is, the other day I was looking, it was Italian, Indian, Mexican, Jamaican, obviously UK as well. But it's so, like, honestly, I see the conversations that the team have with each other. And it's amazing. They are learning, they are going out to different exhibitions that they probably never would have gone to. They're bringing those cultural flavors and influences into the menu. I tell you what's so great as well, like sometimes some of the guys who work here will bring in like different food from their to share with the team from their countries. Like, this is a traditional cake that we have, and this is a traditional this. And I'm like, I come in and watch it, and I'm like, this is beautiful. It's so nice because you see the team are learning so much from each other, and they're forming really strong relationships. And that is transparent. When you walk into our environments, you'll see that the team really connect with each other, and that makes it easier for our guests to connect with our team.
And when you were saying at the beginning too, when you're thinking about how do you enrich your employees' lives, right? And all of that is adding to the richness of their life in a way that, it's not on paper like pay or, a grievance policy or something like that. I suppose, we've talked a little bit about HR needing to, or just business owners, let's be honest, if we're small businesses, needing to prioritize diversity and inclusion from a policy perspective. You also are really pointing to the fact that it needs to live beyond the page, right? That a policy is a policy and can sit in a drawer, but how do you ensure that that's living and breathing in your venue? How do you see that, especially when it comes to recruitment and inviting new people, when you're building this team and you're able to staff it with people from all different backgrounds that bring all different experiences? What do you actively look for in recruitment? How do you build that into your processes?
I think the first thing is you have to understand what it is that you are trying to achieve. What does inclusivity mean to you? So I would always say to someone, if they're interested in being more inclusive and having a more diverse workforce, explain to me what those two words mean to you, and then I'll be able to help you direct you in the right on the right path to make sure that your policy is correct, and then most importantly that you're able to measure the success of that policy on a regular basis. Because I think it's all right just having the words there and having a page or two, a document of like, this is what it means, that and kind of go through keywords that you must sort of learn or understand. But then what does it mean once you put that policy in place? How is it being checked? Who's the person who's going to run it? Who's the person who's going to make sure that the team do feel like there's value in it? And then how do you measure that success after that? Because I think that's the key thing. So from a recruitment point of view, I would be asking myself, why do I want a diverse workforce? Because as soon as you ask that, and then we have a lot of information on our website about this, on Equal Measures, and you can see that there's some really good pointers in there that can help people. So I think that's the first, I think that's the first sort of signposting that I do towards Equal Measures would be that, there's a lot of resource there.
Amazing.
And there's a lot of information which I think is really helpful.
Yeah.
And then after that, if you are serious about having the right policy in place, then we can help to implement that. Because it depends on the workforce. It depends on the amount of people, the size of the team, the location of your team.
Yeah.
The hours that people are working. How do we make sure that we can put all of that in? Put the right policy in place. It doesn't
for your business.
Yeah, for the business. It doesn't disrupt the business. More enhances the business.
Right. And I think it's you pointed to this idea of understanding what these words actually mean to you. We talk about this a lot when it comes to the word sustainability, right? Because people can throw around the word sustainability or sustainable in different places. But if you're not clear on what does that actually mean to your business and what are those principles that you are following, then it just becomes jargon.
Yeah. So it just made me think there was I was asked recently to help make a cocktail competition that's run globally a little bit more inclusive. And my sort of, I guess my question was, okay, so tell me what that means to you, but also what's your starting point? Do you have any data to be able to share with me of why this is important to you? And there wasn't any data. And so I was like, well, this is the first issue.
Right.
You need to actually understand exactly what that word means to you.
Right.
But also, how come you haven't been, is there a reason why you haven't been tracking that up to this date? Because that's a really important thing, because that will actually, surely that will help you identify, areas for growth. And are you talking to the right community? Are you building a community?
Yeah.
Because you can't build a community if everyone's the same.
Right, of course. Especially a global, conversation in a global city, like, not even a global conversation, but if you were trying to build a conversation in London, you absolutely, nobody looks the same here.
Well, yeah, exactly. And my thinking was, if you're not able to track this and you haven't been tracking it, and you're all in your community looks the same, that means that you're only talking to a certain type of person, which is why you need to kind of talk to everyone and not just to certain individuals.
I think there's some subtleties, aren't there, that we see over and over again in hospitality, where you might say that you've got a policy somewhere, or you might be trying to address it, and you haven't actually realized that every photo on your social media channels looks a certain way, and or every photo on your website looks a certain way, and then does that actually represent the community that you're trying to attract? And if we were talking about women in hospitality, and like if every photo of chefs is of a male chef, or every hand is a man's hand holding a cocktail, right? Then these faces don't seem like they're for women. And
and it's so subtle, isn't it? But it's also the consideration of it, and actually not thinking about that as something as simple as a hand with, if it's a restaurant, the hand with the knife and the fork, or the glass. It's all, it all just is how you're talking to your potential guests and recruiting new consumers, I guess. I just think it's I think what's really important is having training sessions around around DEI. And I would say it's as important for me to talk to my team about a cocktail, a new food item that's coming on, as it is about what I'm trying to create as a working environment. So if we have that discussion and we sit down, very often I will say, at the start of a training session, okay, guys, we're going to talk a little bit about, tequila, mezcal, and the new menu that's coming out, but I also want to make sure that the new people that join that group are aware this is a culture that we want. So I reinforce that again. And that is, sometimes that's a really nice way to start, and saying, look, hopefully you all feel like you are welcome, that you are treated equally. And I will always remind them, if you don't feel that, you should always know that you can come to me at any time that you want to, whenever you feel that there's an issue.
that culture of responsibility and really feeling like
yeah,
you've empowered that as a leader within your team.
As a leader, and then hopefully there are individuals within the team that, well, there are individuals within the team that I know that I can talk to and say, you know, please make sure that this is being embedded. I think even yesterday is a perfect example.
Yeah.
I sent, we were short-staffed, and I sent this team a message. I said, look, I realise you're going to be under pressure today because this is quite an unexpected turn of events where someone is off and we are fully booked. Please remember to work as a team and treat everyone with kindness and respect, because there will get that point where you are really super busy and you'll be under pressure. But just remember, kindness, respect, and teamwork is what you need to do. And that's just it's a simple reminder. But I think, you know, that's, again, just trying to reinforce the culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
It can be just a message sometimes.
This is kind of maybe a controversial question. Do you feel like it's getting better, that hospitality is getting better from when you started your career? And, you know, there's been a lot more conversations about you know, everything from sustainability to work-life balance to diversity, equity, inclusion, and hospitality. Do we feel like it's getting better?
Say percentage-wise, I think there's only a small percent that has actually got better, and I think it's probably those that have the resources to be able to make the bigger change. And I think particularly from a bar point of view and a restaurant point of view, from a bar operator, I see a little bit more diversity in our brand partners, the people that are having, you know, that are coming and having meetings with us. I see that has changed, which is great. But I also see that it hasn't changed in the management above those individuals who are coming to see me. So that's where I think there's a big issue. So how far is that going? You know, is there a progression point? Again, the barriers that exist. You know, there's a lot of barriers that exist in progression. I don't know if that has improved. And I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing that change.
And it's so interesting, right? Because we've been talking about recruitment and kind of opening the funnel at the bottom. How do you make sure that we bring talent in? And yet what we also need to make sure we're talking about is, how do you make sure that talent progresses? How do we also diversify boardrooms and open those conversations to make sure that talent is also emerging and pulling through, and that money, you know, like you were just talking about brand partnerships, absolutely fundamental to where the money is flowing. And again, something hospitality businesses can be thinking about is as part of this conversation in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion. Where does your money go? Who are you supporting? Who are you buying things from? Who are you, you know, where do the partnerships go? Where's the money going?
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point. One thing that actually I think is super key from a restaurant point of view, from a bar point of view, a lot of us now have a sustainability statement that we would put on our website, or this is our commitment, this is, you know, these are our brand pillars and these are really important. When we can get to a point where next to sustainability is DEI, I think that's when we know that there's been a real shift. And there really should be, shouldn't there?
Absolutely.
So if you go onto, I don't know, a great restaurant website in London, you see the menu. There might be a little bit that says about us, tells a story, and then it may be a little bit about sustainability. There it is. That's where it's missing, right? And that way, you know that it's an important thing for that individual, you know, for that group, and I think that's so important. And I would love to see that. I think that's a small step which would go a long way, because you're talking to your potential guests and consumers. They understand what you're trying to achieve. Somebody is looking for a job within that company. They will understand, oh, maybe it is for me.
100%.
Maybe 100%. I can apply. You know?
I think, you know, if you don't, I think that's the other thing. We're coming onto this, like, what are the impacts for businesses when you do take a kind of strong, considered, solid approach to diversity, equity, inclusion within your business? And I think that little, like you say, it's a subtle nod, but it opens up a new audience for you. It opens up whenever you are looking for what your next job is going to be.
Yeah.
Of course, you're looking at their website. Of course, you're seeing what their brand is.
Yeah.
And you're missing on talent.
Absolutely.
By not communicating and sharing your perspective on. Yeah.
That's a really quick fix, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And can you imagine the impact if we were to say, let's challenge 100 restaurants in London and around the UK to have that policy written on there, and it could be something that we can help with, or it's something that we can signpost them, on our website. Have that on there. Watch the difference, and you'll see the difference that makes, and it will be like that. And then hopefully that will influence more and more people to do the same thing. And I think that's where you'll see
positive change.
Positive change, yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about, I mean, you've pointed out some of the positives that you felt within your business. Is there anything else in there in terms of the, I mean, it seems so kind of soulless to talk about return on investment in people.
Yeah.
But realistically, businesses are thinking about the return on the investment in their people, right? Yeah. And so whenever HR, whether that's learning and development, all of this sort of stuff, you're spending money, and businesses want to know what's that return to them. How do you think about that as an owner, as an operator, and as a consultant when you're talking to people from Equal Measures?
Well, I think I'm really mindful of the fact now that there's a real concern around, like, the bottom line.
Yes.
There's more sort of, we have to make sure that the economics are in place to be a sustainable, for us anyway. We need to make sure that we are a sustainable business. We have the model in place that enables us to be able to grow every month.
Right.
Because the challenges are that, there are less people going out, there are less people, the spend per heads are slightly down, as I mentioned before.
Yeah.
So I think I think overall, being mindful of the fact that there is a financial, most business operators are thinking about that. The staffing costs are rising, everything is rising.
Yeah, of course.
So the return on investment that you make, I think it's just getting as much value from the individual who works with you as you possibly can by understanding what ticks their box, what the desires are for them. As I mentioned before, it's like, for me, if someone came to me and they were just overwhelmingly the right person for the job, but they had like they wanted X amount more per year. I wouldn't even if it was like, that's going to be really tight and I know that's going to eat into my profit. If I felt that they could deliver something that would enrich the rest of the team, I would be prepared to do that.
Right.
And I think that's the decision that you have to look at. It's like, what does that individual give to the rest of the team, not just to the guest experience? Can they, I guess, tick the boxes that we have that are really important to us as a culture, and how does that transfer to the guest experience? And I think that is when it all comes back. Because happy guests spend more money.
And everything that you're saying, happy staff stay longer in their jobs, right? And so one of the things that we know about hospitality is that churn is actually one of the things that costs the most money when it comes to staffing. And so retention is the name of the game. The more that you can keep your staff in your team, and that comes through these things that you've identified, which is enriching their kind of experience and their lives. It comes through feeling a sense of purpose in your job, and an alignment with your employer is increasingly important. Young people increasingly are reporting that as a fundamental thing they're looking for in their life. They're looking for a job that aligns with their values. And so when you can retain people in your hospitality venue, that ends up being a savings over time.
Absolutely, 100%. And I feel blessed in a way that we've had that. We've had one person with us from the start of 5 years, 5.5 years. They were with us. We have three of our management team that have been with us for over 2 years.
Wow.
Another individual who's been with us for 3 years. So we, I think probably about
Showing that.
50% of our team is like, have been with us for a couple of years or more.
Wow.
And that's really important because they understand the culture. These are the individuals that can actually help to, to get that message across
Right.
in a really clear way, and identify when it's not quite right.
Right.
And I don't want to say like this isn't the actual way, but sometimes they might be able to say that's not quite right. That's not how we do things here, and I don't know if you're, not the right fit, but I don't know if you understand exactly what it means to be part of this family that we're trying to create.
Yeah.
So hugely important.
Yeah.
And again, I think if you do have team members who stay with you for a long time, that's when it becomes really important to make sure that they are enriched inside work and outside of work, and the work-life balance is correct.
Right.
And it can be simple little things that we can help to do, like, is there a brand trip that's coming up that we can actually say, well, I've done that one already, why don't you go to it? Or, are there free tickets that are quite often given to us to go to events and stuff like that? I gave a couple of our teams some tickets to go to the Brits recently, and
amazing.
Yeah, and they loved it. They were really happy with that. So I think it's just sharing those moments, that give them that little
passing around opportunity, finding ways to pass around opportunity, and that can look different in different types of restaurants and different types of brands, and what those opportunities might look like. But finding the ways to distribute them down your team can be really powerful for young people coming up in this industry. Sometimes we focus a lot on, or the sort of media narrative around hospitality focuses a lot on what's wrong with hospitality as an industry, and not enough on how actually amazing hospitality can be for all of these diverse experiences. It's an industry that can provide loads and loads of opportunity if you can get that balance right between what what work and what life looks like.
Yeah, and I think also incentives are really cool. We used to have we should look to do this again, actually, just thinking about it, but we used to do staff incentives where we would give vouchers to a restaurant.
Nice.
So like, whoever performed the best at selling X, Y, Z would then get like £100 voucher to go to visit a partner nearby. And I think, again, that's a really nice thing to do, because it gets kind of gives back to hospitality. Do you know what I mean? Rather than just saying, well, here's £100. I think actually it gives another experience for them as well. So
absolutely.
I think that's something that I must put back on the agenda.
We've done something similar with code memberships. And so, the sort of code hospitality memberships as a way to give discounts to your team for also eating out and going out. And what you recognize is, if you're of hospitality, going out and seeing other hospitality venues and how they operate is actually really good for your business. It opens their mind, it teaches them new things, it gives them new ideas. It's also, as a young member of staff, seeing that there's this new cool place and you get 30% off the bill is quite exciting and quite a perk.
It's great. And I think that's such a valid point, because when you're working in hospitality, sometimes you can only see your venue for like 3 weeks. The only experience that you have of like being in a restaurant or a bar environment is your place, right? And you don't get as much it's just obvious, isn't it? If you go and visit somewhere else, or you have more time to go and visit another bar, you might think, my goodness, look how great that server is. I like the way that they do that. Or look at that bartender, that cocktail looks amazing, that garnish is fantastic, that food dish is amazing, maybe I should, so all of these thoughts start coming through, and then obviously that does, have a positive impact on the individuals at work in their workplace. So it's very, very true. And I really do try hard to make sure that our team have, I think everyone would say that there's a really good balance here. We wanted to switch from, just a big deal, from switching from 5 days to 4 days for everyone. and it works for some and it doesn't for others.
Yeah.
And so, but I will say to my team, you know, anyone who's coming in new, I'll be like, how many days do you want to work? And if some people say 4, I'll say, let's see how we can make that.
Yeah.
Let's see how we can make it. It's just someone working for us at the moment only wants to do 3 days, but is totally committed.
Amazing.
On those 3 days.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because, you know, across sustainability conversations, I think the thing that has become increasingly apparent to me is just how important it is to have these conversations, to sort of build awareness, to build partnership, to build solidarity in things. And it's been sticking with me when you said earlier about, you know, especially in the moment that we find ourselves where it's really challenging for hospitality, and you might need to be flexible in your staffing, and you only have a 2-day-a-week role. There's something interesting about whether there's opportunity to say, like, you've got this role that's 2 days a week. Maybe there's someone else in Bermondsey, in Dalston, that, you know, could use somebody another 2 days. And are there ways for us to be a little bit more dynamic in how we're thinking about the wholeness of a person and the wholeness of an opportunity?
Correct.
There's something interesting there, I think.
Yeah. And do you know, sorry to interrupt you, but you know,
No,
it just made me think, actually, there's an individual who works for us 2 days a week. He's studying, is at university. He's a really wonderful guy. And we had a one-to-one recently, and I said to him, you know, how are you? How can I help you? And he said, I want to be the best that I can be at work. I said, I think I might promote you. And he was like, okay. And I said, even if you're doing 2 days a week,
right,
with that mentality,
right,
you should still have progression.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you can't progress to be a part-time manager,
right,
or a part-time, you know, head bartender, or whatever it may be.
right.
But I said to him, I'm going to promote you.
Yeah.
Because that was what I wanted to hear. And he was very shocked because he didn't think that because he was part-time,
Right.
that would be a possibility. So I think it's recognizing, as you're saying, it could be 2 people, you know, that maybe there's 2 people that,
right,
you know, that
exactly.
it
looks different than maybe what you thought. And and, you know, like all of these things, yes, it's really challenging in the trading environment that we're in, but it requires just like a bit of thought and a bit of time to think about it.
Yeah.
I want to, you know, want to wrap up our conversation. I could easily talk with you for hours about these things, you know, as we've done over a cocktail before. But I would love to think, you know, if you're projecting into the future and we're building a hospitality industry that looks more inclusive, that looks more diverse, that looks more equitable as a whole, what do you hope to see in 5 years' time, in, you know, 10 years' time even?
I think the first thing would be what we spoke about, is having those DI policies front and center on, because that's probably the first step in the hiring practice, right? You know, so making sure that is something that is listed in the information about restaurant, bar, whatever, you know, whatever hospitality sector. This is our establishment. This is what we stand for. These are our, you know, key pillars. I mentioned that a few times, but this is also super important to us.
Yeah.
And should resonate with the individuals who are not just looking to for work, but those individuals who are going into that establishment as well. And I think that would be a really good first step. The second thing is, we mentioned as well, boardroom level has to change.
Right.
Yeah, you know, there are so many fantastic organizations within hospitality that all look the same. And once you get to senior management, and that's so right. Unless that change happens, things will stay the same.
Right.
So we need to work really hard to make sure that you know, that progression happens. And there doesn't need to be a fear around this from senior management or senior level of like, oh my goodness, and what happens if it is more diverse and I say the wrong thing or I do the wrong thing? That's part of the problem. If there is a fear around like what, you know, true equity looks like, then I think that's a real issue, and it's a big barrier.
Yeah.
So it's going to take some, brave decisions
Yeah.
By senior management, but they will be so rewarded as well.
Yes.
Because it will only enrich the business. It will only be better for everyone, for like the workforce, due to the to the consumers who are going to be impacted in a really positive way as well. So
Yeah.
I think that would be the thing that I'd like to see. I'm really hopeful that we will get there.
Okay. Good to always end on a bit of hope on where we think that things are going.
I'm really hopeful that we'll get there, because there's enough, there's enough of us talking and trying to make it happen. So I think we will get there.
Yeah. You're pointing to something so valuable, right? Where if we stop viewing this as, one pie, and that if somebody gets a bigger slice of pie, that means I'm getting a smaller slice of pie, and we start to realize that actually, having a more diverse, more equitable workforce grows the pie, and is like, this is the thing that people need to stop being afraid of. And in so many of these conversations, right, is to realize that building more balance, more equity for others isn't about taking it away from you. It's actually enriching the experience for everyone.
100%. And I think, I guess the final thing to say would be like, don't stop learning, never stop learning. And so, like, even if you're in a senior management position, it doesn't mean that, and your business is like functioning great and you're ticking all the boxes, you can still learn. And there'll be somebody who can, from a different background, that can actually teach a few things. Not just about business, but just about life, which will impact, which will obviously have a positive impact as well. So I think that just having different experiences really is so useful for all of us, like Absolutely. As a society as a whole. It makes such a big difference.
Huge. That is the perfect place to end it. And conversations like this are hopefully one step towards, having more transparent conversations in our industry about where we are, what needs to happen, what we think. And so trying to pull together different perspectives to share with others. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
It's great to see you.
Great to see you. And hopefully next time over a margarita.
Yeah, for sure.
And have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You
thank
too.
You.
Thanks.